I want you to close your eyes for just a second and imagine a sound. Just kind of picture it in your mind. It's this really resonant, low-frequency hum. Something so deep, you almost feel it vibrating in your chest rather than actually hearing it in your ears.
Right, like a bass line.
Exactly, the ultimate source, the divine light. But then, layered right over the top of that ancient hum, imagine the subtle, really rhythmic, incredibly fast whoosh of a massive data stream.
Like pure information.
Yeah, pure information, just cascading all around you. Because you aren't just listening to noise, you are listening to the sound of architecture. And not, a building of glass and steel, the architecture of reality itself.
It really is a mind-bending concept.
It totally is. And today, we're going on a deep dive to decompile an ancient text that operates, well, surprisingly, like a Silicon Valley software suite.
Which is such a wild way to look at it.
It really is.
Yeah.
We're exploring the framework laid out in J.R. Ahmed's book, The Algebra of Revelation. And specifically, we're zooming in on this one single astonishing chapter of his work titled Ha-Mim.
Yeah, and Ahmed's work here, it completely strips away the traditional lens we usually use to look at theology. I mean, he doesn't treat this ancient text as, just mere poetry or some collection of disconnected historical parables.
Right.
He treats it as a modular mathematical architecture, like a verifiable system.
Which is fascinating because when you approach an ancient text, you expect metaphors.
Yeah.
You expect parables. You don't necessarily expect a highly structured objective protocol.
No, definitely not.
But Ahmed points out that in the Quran, there's this alphabetical preamble, the letters Ha and Mim, or Ha-Mim in Arabic, that introduces a continuous, completely unbroken cluster of 7 distinct chapters.
Right, chapters 40 through 46.
Exactly. This family of chapters is known as the Ha-Mim. And Ahmed argues this isn't just some random literary grouping. It is actually the standard interface protocol for the manifestation of truth.
Yeah, and to really grasp the gravity of what Ahmed is proposing here, we kind of have to borrow a framework from computer science.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So every functional system requires hardware, right? The physical, immutable components that make the machine actually exist.
The motherboard, the chips, all that.
Exactly. And then it requires software, the programs that actually run on that hardware to produce a visible interactive output. And Ahmed's premise is that these 7 chapters function as a unified verification suite.
A verification suite.
Yeah, one that explicitly tests the relationship between cosmic hardware and physical software.
Wow. Okay, but before we can run any software, we have to understand the binary code, right? We need to decompile it.
Right.
So imagine the static of a glitching audio file suddenly resolving into one clear, perfectly steady, high-definition tone. That steady tone is the letter Ha.
The anchor.
Yeah, in the Quranic lexicon, Ha is the semantic anchor for words like haq.
Which translates to truth or objective reality.
Exactly. And hudud, which refers to boundaries or limits. So, systemically speaking, Ha represents the fixed constant. It is the absolute hardware of truth.
And because it operates as the hardware, it's entirely irreducible. I mean, it is the unalterable cosmic constant. Human beings cannot negotiate with it. We can't corrupt it with a bad line of code, and we certainly cannot bypass it.
You just can't.
Right. It forms the immovable parameters of existence.
So, I mean, think of Ha as the kernel of an operating system.
Yeah.
You can't rewrite the kernel.
No.
You can't debate with it. It just dictates the absolute boundaries of what the machine can and cannot do.
Yeah.
And here's the catch. A kernel sitting in a dark server room doing nothing isn't very useful to anyone.
Right. It has to do something.
It has to produce an output.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the second letter, Mim.
Yeah. So if Ha is the unseen, immutable hardware, Mim is the visible output. In Ahmed's structural analysis, Mim stands for manifestation.
Manifestation, okay.
It anchors words like mubin, meaning clear or manifest, and makin, meaning firmly established. It's essentially the software.
I love that analogy.
Mim signifies the exact, precise point where that abstract, invisible cosmic constant becomes a clear, observable phenomenon. We see the output in the material cosmos, we see it in biological ecosystems, and crucially, we see it in the laboratory of human history.
So putting them together creates this profound signal declaration. When you have the combination Ha-Mim, it is the system literally announcing the fixed reality is now made manifest.
It's a notification.
Exactly. It's a notification to the user, to you, the listener, that the following data modules are dedicated entirely to verifying the integrity of this system. Every single one of these 7 associated chapters begins by explicitly asserting the cancel.
The transmission.
Right, the transmission or the downloading of this objective reality. It is the system saying, incoming data stream from the absolute source. Stand by.
But here's the thing about any system, right? No matter how perfectly coded it is, it's going to encounter friction the moment it starts running and interacting with human agents.
Oh, inevitably.
That friction takes the form of resistance, entropy, arrogance, cognitive dissonance. The system is running perfectly, but the human users are constantly introducing malware.
Right, so in computer networking, you have the OSI model, which is this conceptual framework with 7 layers. And if you have an error at the foundational physical layer, that error cascades all the way up through the network until the application layer just completely crashes.
It's a total failure.
Yeah. And Ahmed argues the Ha-Mim cluster works exactly like this. It is a cascading system audit.
Ping, 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 going right down the line.
Exactly. It doesn't just list theological ideas. It runs a sequential, multidimensional test of how the fixed reality manifests across different variables. So let's look at the abstract systemic side of this audit first. The sequence begins with Surah 40, which audits power.
And the test case here is so fascinating. It focuses on a believing man operating deep inside the court of Pharaoh.
Right, fair.
Yeah, and Pharaoh represents the ultimate totalitarian regime. In systemic terms, Pharaoh is a completely closed information loop, like a localized intranet designed to block all external signals.
So it's like a
totalitarian firewall.
Yes, a totalitarian firewall.
Yeah.
I love that. But this individual, this man, he uses rational evidence, termed al-bayinat, to verify the divine system from the inside.
Even with the firewall up.
Exactly. This module proves that the hardware of truth is internally accessible and verifiable. The system cannot be jammed by localized political corruption. The cosmic server can always be pinged by an individual seeking objective reality.
Which is such a powerful thought. But then, once that individual node successfully connects to the truth, the system immediately anticipates the next vulnerability.
Right.
How does that node process the truth? And that is why the very next step in the sequence, Surah 41, audits the linguistics.
Okay, linguistics?
Yeah, it literally details the sectioning of the manifest code. The module clarifies that this software, the Quran, is delivered in a precise Arabic interface calibrated specifically for human cognition.
It's not just random sounds.
Right. It emphatically states it is a text for a people who know. It's designed for logic and active processing, not for, passive, unthinking recitation.
So the system actually demands intellectual engagement.
Exactly. A user blindly clicking agree on terms and conditions without reading them is totally useless to this architecture. The code requires the human intellect to actively compile it.
Which naturally pushes the audit to the next logical layer, right? Because if the individual is processing the code correctly, how do they scale it?
How do you build a network?
Yes. So Surah 42 audits strategy. This chapter introduces a secondary subheader to the code, Ain Sinkaf, representing insight, authority, and power. And here is where it introduces the concept of Shura.
Collective human governance.
Right. It proves that for the manifested truth to achieve operational power in human society, it requires decentralized peer-to-peer processing. I mean, a single computer running the software is fine, but a network society actively governing together according to the code. That is what gives the system its power.
It forces the realization that the software must be implemented collectively. I mean, a society cannot claim to be running the Ha-Mim protocol if its governance structures are entirely autocratic or just totally disconnected from mutual consultation.
It makes total sense. But then the system audits the ultimate human trap. Surah 43 is the audit of material versus reality.
This is a big one.
Oh, huge. The chapter contrasts superficial gold or material adornment, zukhruf, with the actual structural integrity of the manifest book. So it audits the fatal human error of looking at superficial wealth and mistaking it for systemic stability.
Yeah, it tests whether the user understands the difference between the chassis and the processor. Because human societies constantly fall into the trap of thinking a computer is invincible just because the external casing is made of solid gold. Meanwhile, they're completely ignoring the fact that the motherboard inside is literally melting down.
So, okay, I completely buy this progression for the abstract side of things. Power, linguistics, collective governance, material traps. The logical through line makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But I have to push back here. Here's where it gets really interesting for me. How can a text audit physical reality? I mean, you can't write a line of code that changes the weather.
Yeah.
So how does Ahmed justify this leap to empirical physics in the second half of the Ha-Mim cluster?
Well, what's fascinating here is that this is where Ahmed's synthesis becomes truly groundbreaking. The universe isn't just a simulation of abstract concepts, it is deeply empirical.
Okay.
So the audit must shift to physical outputs to prove that the software and the hardware are perfectly integrated. Consider Module 5, Surah 44. This module audits atmospheric consequences. It introduces the physical inevitability of smoke dukkhan,
Wait, really? Literal smoke.
literal smoke and environmental degradation. The text warns that the manifest truth is a physical force that will overwhelm societies existing in a state of cognitive doubt. It actually states, but they are in doubt, amusing themselves. Then watch for the day when the sky will bring a visible smoke.
Wow.
And Ahmed points out the causality here. Cognitive dissonance and spiritual arrogance, they lead directly to a society neglecting its environment, exploiting its resources, and just completely ignoring objective limits.
The abstract error becomes physical.
Exactly. The intellectual failure eventually produces a toxic, suffocating atmosphere. The abstract error cascades into a physical, empirical disaster.
That reframes the entire concept. The arrogance isn't just a bad thought, it's a structural failure that inevitably poisons the air you breathe.
Right, and moving to Module 6, Surah 45, the audit expands to jurisprudence. This chapter is called Al-Jathiyah, which translates to the crouching.
The crouching.
Yeah. This module abandons human philosophy entirely and points directly to empirical biology. It tells the human observer to look at the creation of the heavens, the earth, and the sheer biological diversity of life. The argument is that the hack, the fixed reality, is written directly into the DNA of nature.
So if a society builds its legal and economic frameworks in opposition to that natural DNA,
The consequence is inescapable. Arrogant systems that legislate against the natural order will eventually be forced into a crouching submission before this empirical evidence. I mean, you can pass as many laws as you want declaring gravity doesn't exist, but the physical realities of the cosmic hardware will eventually bring you to your knees. The universe simply forces compliance.
crouching submission, the imagery there is chilling. It implies a total systemic collapse under the weight of sheer reality.
Which brings us to the final layer of the audit, Module 7, Surah 46, the historical audit. This chapter is named Al-Kaf, meaning the sand tracks.
Sand tracks.
Yeah. It focuses entirely on the geographical remnants of destroyed nations. And these were not primitive societies. The text emphasizes they were historically and technologically advanced civilizations. They had wealth, power, and architectural brilliance. But they disconnected their operational software from the manifest reality.
And what is left of them? Just empty, blowing tracts of sand.
It serves as the ultimate empirical warning. No amount of technological advancement, no matter how sophisticated the society's tools are, can save a civilization that unplugs itself from the system's core hardware. The sand tracks are the physical graveyard of corrupted software.
Okay, so we have decompiled the abstract logic. We've audited the physical environment, the biology, and the historical ruins. The through line is incredibly tight. But Ahmed goes even deeper into how the system categorizes the raw data you, the listener, are interacting with right now.
Yes, the metadata.
Right. If you look closely at the text, there's a very specific terminology that always follows these Ha-Mim headers, identifying secondary metadata.
Because the text is meticulously self-aware, it tags its own information, categorizing whether the human node is interacting with a static database or the active runtime of the system.
Explain that difference.
Well, the distinction lies between two crucial Arabic terms, Al-Kitab and Al-Quran. In common parlance, they are often translated interchangeably to just mean the Holy Book. But systemically, their Arabic roots indicate vastly different operational functions.
So imagine a rhythmic contrast in the background audio of a track. Right?
Yeah.
A steady, heavy, anchoring bass line representing a massive static database. But then, layered rapidly over that baseline, you have a kinetic, fast-moving synthesizer representing the active processing of an application running in real time. That contrast is built right into the architecture. Break down the difference for us.
Sure, let's start with the database. When you see the Ha-Mim headers across these 7 chapters, they almost exclusively lead directly into a mention of Al-Kitab. This word is derived from the Arabic root KTB, which means to write, to prescribe, or to codify. In Ahmed's systemic view, Al-Kitab represents the static database. It is the preserved record.
The hard drive, the long-term, unchangeable storage of cosmic law.
Exactly. When Ha-Mim precedes the book, the header acts as an indexing protocol. It verifies the unchanging structural integrity of the stored data. It guarantees to the user that the cosmic law is fixed. The code has been written, the physical limits of the universe are set, and the database is absolutely secure.
The baseline of the track, but then we have the fast-moving synthesizer,
Yeah.
the active runtime.
Right. By contrast, when you look at other alphabetical headers in the text, like Taha in chapter 20 or Yasin in chapter 36, they lead directly into a mention of Al-Quran. This word comes from the root QR, which means to read, to assemble, or to process.
Process, okay.
Yeah, Al-Quran represents the runtime environment. It focuses on the human agent actively reading, processing, and executing the signal in real time.
So Al-Kitab is the static law in the books, and Al-Quran is the active execution of that law by the human intellect.
Precisely.
And to prove this isn't just some exercise in semantics, Ha-Mim points to a massive aha moment outside the Ha-Mim cluster. Look at Surah 27, An-Nahl. This chapter deals extensively with the story of King Solomon. Now, Solomon's kingdom is presented as the ultimate example of intelligence governance. We are talking about managing unimaginably complex systems, diverse human populations, intelligence networks, even non-human entities.
The complexity of Solomon's kingdom is key here, because Surah 27 is the only chapter that explicitly merges both of these terms right in its opening verse. It announces, "These are the verses of the Quran, a.e., a clear book."
Why merge them there and nowhere else? Because Solomon's specific style of governance required both functions working simultaneously. If he only relied on the static database, the fixed, rigid administrative law of Al-Kitab, his incredibly diverse, complex kingdom would have snapped under the rigidity. He needed the active, dynamic processing of real-time intelligence, the Quran, to adapt to daily challenges.
But conversely, if he only had the active processing without the anchor of the static law, the kingdom would have descended into chaos and, subjective relativism. His governance required both the runtime and the database operating in perfect synchronization.
It's amazing.
It is. The text merges the terms at the exact moment it introduces a society that successfully integrated both.
The architecture is just staggering. So what does this all mean for you listening to this deep dive right now? Why does it matter that an ancient text uses a highly specific mathematical and alphabetical code to introduce a 7-part audit of reality?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, according to Ahmed, the functional purpose of Ha-Mim is to act as a systemic certificate of authenticity.
A certificate of authenticity.
Yeah, it ensures the information you are processing isn't just human philosophy. It isn't a cultural tradition that can be debated or voted upon. It is a direct, flawless reflection of the cosmic hardware. It establishes what we can call architectural justice.
Architectural justice. I like that phrase.
The text is brutally realistic about human nature. It acknowledges our tendency to debate, to argue, to try and hack the system, right? But it explicitly warns against disputing these constants without objective authority. In the very first module, Surah 40, it states, "None dispute regarding the signs of Allah except those who disbelieve."
Because they have disconnected their local node from the root reality.
Exactly. The Ha-Mim header establishes that these spiritual and societal laws are as fixed as the laws of thermodynamics. I mean, if you dispute the law of gravity by walking off the edge of a tall building, you haven't changed the reality of gravity.
No, gravity doesn't care about your philosophical objections.
Right. You have merely ensured your own catastrophic failure within the system. Disputing the hack the fixed reality doesn't alter the truth. It just breaks the node that actively resists it.
It is a breathtaking synthesis. The exact same mathematical laws, the same unyielding physical constants that govern the orbits of the stars, the pressure of the atmosphere and the expansion of the galaxies, those exact same laws govern human ethics.
They do.
They govern geopolitical stability. They govern historical consequences. The hardware of the universe and the software of human morality are running the exact same source code. And if they fall out of synchronization, the system crashes.
The Ha-Mim suite is essentially the ultimate diagnostic tool, proving that consistency module by module, from the totalitarian firewall of Pharaoh to the empty sand tracks of ruined civilizations.
Which leaves us with a pretty heavy realization about the modern world. We spend so much of our time iterating. We frantically update our technologies. We patch our political systems. We constantly rewrite our societal norms, trying to find some kind of stability.
Yeah, always searching for the next update.
Right. But the kernel, the the cosmic hardware, it never changes, and it never negotiates. So I want to leave you with a final thought to explore on your own. If human societies are constantly patching and updating their cultural software, while completely ignoring the immutable hardware of objective reality? Are we just programming ourselves to become the next empty sand tracks for future generations to audit?
Oof. That is an uncomfortable but structurally inevitable question.
Think about that the next time you hear the deep, quiet hum of a server running in a dark room. We'll see you next time.